Okay, so yeah, just gone 7. Let's make a start. So yeah, welcome to this my third webinar of the series. So again, we're looking at the physiology of endurance running, but today we're focusing specifically on masters athletes, so those 35 and above athletes. And yeah, what does physiology look like for them, and how do we need to modify training to get the most out of our performances in the older athletes. So if you don't know me, my name is Dan Nash. I'm a PhD candidate at Cardiff Metropolitan University, and I work in partnership with Welsh Athletics and Welsh Triathlon, where I help deliver their physiology support. I'm also a South Wales coach, so I help run the South Wales Regional Development Programme, and I'm a runner myself, and I've competed for Wales and Great Britain. So before we start properly, a few groundkeeping rules. So you're all muted at the minute, and if you could stay muted throughout the whole webinar, that would be fantastic. We're going to have a Q&A section at the end, and you should be able to find a drop-down box where you can type any questions into the questions function. So you can put any questions in there as we go along, and then when we get to the end, I'll go through some, and I probably won't be able to cover all of them, but we'll pick some out, and yeah, we can try and answer your questions. If you've got any technical issues, then I think there's a chat function as well. So if you put that in the chat function, then hopefully myself or Liz Davis can help sort you out. Yeah, I think that's about it. Let's make a start. If I can change the slides, let's see. Wait a minute. There we go. Awesome. So the aims of this workshop. So first, we're going to establish the physiological changes that occur as we age. So how does the physiology or the inner workings of the body change as we get older? We also want to help you gain an insight of how we should manipulate training to optimize performance and longevity in the masters athletes. So how should we change our training and our nutrition and other lifestyle factors to accommodate for these physiological changes? And we're also very lucky today to be joined by Ali Dixon. Ali really doesn't need any introduction, but if you don't know her, she's an Olympian. She competed in the marathon at the Rio Olympics. She's a British marathon champion, multiple-time British marathon champion with a personal best of 2:29. She's also a 50-kilometer world record holder and was world champion in 2019, Commonwealth Games 6th placer. And maybe the most impressive fact of them all is that she's done all of this after the age of 35. So thanks for joining us today, Ali.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Anything I've missed out from your intro, but you think I should have included?
I don't think so. No, I think you've covered the main bits there. Yeah.
Great, awesome. Okay. Yeah, so that's the aims of what we're going to try and get through today. Firstly, then we're going to say what actually happens to performance. Let's forget about physiology at the minute. What actually happens to performance as we age? And this graph is showing the world record, the single age world records for the 10K. So it's the world record that's been set by a 20-year-old, a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, etc. And in orange, we've got the women, and in blue, we've got the men. And hopefully you can see already that there's sort of 3 distinct phases. We've got a first phase, which is a sort of plateau phase between the age of 20 and about 40. And here it's completely flat. Age doesn't seem to be a factor on performance at this age. You can perform equally well as a 20-year-old as a 40-year-old. You've then got a slight gradual decline in performance after the age of 40 up to the age of about 75, 80, but it is gradual. And actually, if you look at some of the dots in particular, there's a 70-year-old man who's still running comfortably under 40 minutes for 10K, which is quite impressive. And then after the age of like 75, 80, performance seems to decline more rapidly. But is all this all physiology, or there are other things going on as well? And I expect there are other factors as well as physiology and the physiological changes that occur as we age. So yeah, other things to consider. Slowing down probably isn't inevitable, and we're going to go through some of those points now. So firstly, these 20 to 40-year-olds who are setting age group world records or single age world records, they're going to be professionals. Running is their job. They've got no other job to take into consideration. Probably unlikely to have a family, which is another big factor. They're going to have access to the best facilities. They're going to have access to the best coaches to be able to go on altitude training, to camps. And of course, motivation is going to be incredibly high. These people are competing for world records, Olympic medals. And it's also important to consider that it's not just one or two people who have this perfect or near perfect setup. There's hundreds of people who have got a fantastic setup that's going to allow them to perform at their optimum. And that's probably not quite the same for these people who are in the older bracket. They're much more likely to have a job. They're going to much more likely to have a family. Access to the best coaches and facilities is probably not going to be have the best access to facilities. Motivation is still probably going to be high in these people. They're still setting age group world records, but at the same time, they're not competing to make the Olympics. And although participation is definitely up in the 40+ age groups, it's more how many people are in that age bracket who do have the perfect setup and have got everything optimized. It's probably quite a lot less than those who are in the 40 and below bracket. So actually, these are all things that are not to do with physiology at all, but are going to have a factor on performance. And actually, if you look at records in the 40+ category, so the age group records, they're continuing to drop year on year. And if you compare that to the overall world records, they're taking a long time to get any quicker. For example, the 5K world record that just got broken, that was 15 years old. However, if you look at let's say the 60 marathon world record, that's coming down and continuing to fall at a much quicker rate. So actually, even these older athletes have probably still got a lot of room for potential. Is there anything you'd like to talk about there, Ali? Any other lifestyle factors that you would consider?
Not really. You've covered most things there. For myself, it was kind of, getting to that 35, I was more kind of mentally mature enough to make the decision to, go for it sort of thing. Whereas beforehand, it was always humming and hawing and talk myself out of it. So yeah, I think kind of mental maturity as well is one of the factors.
You've sort of come from the opposite direction, haven't you, really, to having a job, and then becoming professional and making teams, having access to camps and things like that. And did you find that made a big difference to your performance?
Yeah, for me, kind of, access to altitude was the big thing. If you look at my bloods and everything, you'd say I was a non-responder, but every time I've been to altitude, I've come back and performed. So it's one of those ones where you look and say, well, once you're in that altitude environment, all what you're doing is running, eating, sleeping. Whereas at home, even being a full-time athlete, you've still got to be doing like the housework and nipping to the supermarket and family commitments and that sort of thing. So yeah, having access to good quality camps is definitely a big one for me.
Yeah, so it just shows that actually, although physiology does change, all the changes that occur with age are probably not all to do with physiology. There's lots of other things going on that are going to intrude on your training. And actually, aging is probably just one part of it. And it's also worth considering, like I said, this is at a world population level. It doesn't account for the individual. And like we said, Ali went professional in her 30s and saw big gains in performance at that age. Another athlete who's performed better and bucks this trend is Emma Steptoe, who I'm going to use as a case study here. And people might know of Emma, but Emma ran the London Marathon in in the elite fields, age 44, and set a marathon personal best of 2:32. Again, that bucks the trend of earlier. And if we look at Emma's 10K times, when she was age 38, she was running 38 minutes. But actually, by age 44, she's brought that all the way down to 33 minutes, which is a massive jump in performance and is completely against the trajectory of the world best times. But how has Emma done this? Well, actually, having spoken to Emma, when she was 38, she was running 40 miles a week. But actually, by the time she got to 44, she'd progressed her training, which shows she was running 90 to 100 miles a week. So actually, there is a precedent for people getting faster when they're older, if actually they haven't already optimized their training. So actually increasing the amount of training that you're doing, being smarter with your training, can lead to increases in performance even into your 40s and possibly beyond if you haven't got a big training history. And then Emma did decline over the next preceding years, but actually having spoken to her, part of that was the fact that actually she was no longer doing as many miles and actually wasn't training as much as she was previously, and injuries I think are also a factor. So actually, although her performance has declined from 44 years onwards, it's not necessarily aging, it's more the fact that actually she's not doing the same amount of training, she's not the same training load as she did previously. So now we're going to start talking about the physiology. So firstly, VO2 max. Hopefully you're all aware of my last webinar, but just to recap what VO2 max is. So it's the greatest rate at which we can use oxygen to release energy. So it's the maximal aerobic capacity, if you like. So it's measured in milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. It basically represents how much oxygen you can breathe in through your lungs, transfer into the blood, that can get pumped around the body, and then importantly used by the working muscles. So it's not simply how much oxygen we breathe in, it's how much oxygen we can use within the working muscles to release energy from our carbohydrate stores. And if we're working at 100% of VO2 max, so we're using all of our aerobic capacity, it represents a speed that we can sustain for about 6 minutes. So it's a really quite high intensity speed. And it's an important predictor of performance. It's not the only predictor of performance, but actually you're not going to find an elite level runner who hasn't got a certain VO2 max value. For example, you wouldn't find an elite runner who's got a VO2 max in the 40s. So it's important, but unfortunately it does decline with age, and that's partly due to the fact that we lose heart rate max with age, or our heart rate max declines with age. We lose about roughly a 1 beat per year, and that means we can't pump as much oxygen-rich blood around the body, so we can know there's not as much oxygen available for the working muscles. And as you can see from this graph on the right here, slowly declines with age. This is the mean population value. This is the 95th percentile. So this is the top 5% in the world will have a VO2 max on this line, and as you can see, it also declines with age. But as you see, we can see from here, these are the world best VO2 maxes recorded for people of different ages. So similar to the world best 10K times for different ages we saw earlier. These are the world best VO2 max scores. And actually you can see that athletes are still, even older athletes in their 70s are still having VO2 max values that are incredibly high and much higher than the mean population when they're young. So this is the value for the 70-year-old here is a VO2 max in the 60s, and that's way above the mean population VO2 max score. And there are elite athletes out there that have got VO2 max scores in their 60s. So although it does decline, this suggests that we can do something about it. So this is a nice study here, and this looked at 43 elite male runners, and they were tested when they were 25, and then they were tested again 47 years later. But the difference was that one group of these of athletes continued to train and compete, so they were still training for performance. Some of them kept training, but they weren't competing anymore. It was more just to try and keep a bit fit. And then some of them stopped training altogether, so they weren't training anymore. And if we want to look at the ones that trained for performance, they only lost 8.8% of their VO2 max over 22 years. The ones that trained for fitness, they lost 16.6%. And interestingly, those are ones that trained that stopped training altogether. They lost 18%, which isn't much different to the ones that are just training for fitness. So what does this tell us? Well, it suggests that training for performance is protective against VO2 max decline. And that's despite the fact actually these athletes, although they were still training and still competing, their mileage did drop from 125 kilometers a week to 71 kilometers a week. So actually, how much of that is due to aging and how much of it is still because they've just reduced their mileage? That's probably going to be a factor as well. So it's likely that if they'd maintained their mileage, their VO2 max drop would have been even less. But as I said earlier, interestingly, there's not much difference between those who trained for fitness and those who trained for who had stopped training altogether. And this, along with other studies, suggests that actually maybe it's the fact that they weren't doing any intense training. If they're training for fitness, then they were probably just doing easy running. They were doing 41 kilometers a week. And if they're training for fitness and not looking for competitions, they probably weren't doing any high intensity training. And we know that high intensity training is a potent way to improve VO2 max. So actually, maybe VO2 max is really important. Training at high intensities is important to retain that VO2 max as we age. So practical takeaways then. Well, we know that training can help maintain your VO2 max. But actually, interval training and some high intensity training might be is probably going to have the greatest impact. So you probably want to look at intensities above 90% of heart rate max, up to 100%, but actually anywhere in that 90% plus is probably going to have an impact on VO2 max. And you probably want to do intervals of between 2 and 5 minutes. The reason being, if you go for longer than 5 minutes, actually it's too long to maintain a high intensity for. So actually, if you're going longer than 5 minutes, then you're probably not going to be able to reach a high enough intensity. But at the same time, if you're only running for 2 minutes, that's not enough time for your VO2 max to gear up to its maximum capacity. It takes about 90 seconds for your VO2 max, your oxygen consumption to go from a resting level up to its maximal capacity. So it's the evidence suggests actually these medium length intervals of 2 to 5 minutes are the best way of improving your VO2 max. But obviously, there's always injury risks to consider with high intensity training. I certainly wouldn't recommend jumping in from doing no high intensity running, no track sessions, to going and doing them on the track. So you need a suitable level of conditioning of strength work that could be required, and we're going to talk a bit about that later. And for some people, doing hard intervals on the bike may be more appropriate. If you know that some people, if you're injury prone when you do high intensity intervals, there's no reason why you can't jump on a bike or go into the pool and do similar types of training sessions. And you're still going to get the values of the intensity, but if you combine that with some low intensity training, then you're going to get the best of both worlds. Ali, have you got anything on VO2 max and high intensity intervals you'd like to bring up here?
Yeah, just kind of recently I've dropped my training from lockdown and everything, and I was kind of focusing more on trying to get the speed development back again. So I was doing kind of lower volume, higher intensity, and what I found was I couldn't push right up towards that heart rate max. I can sustain kind of 85–90%, that's where I do my threshold runs, but anything above that 90% and I'd be really struggling. But again, it's kind of looking at other factors what might affect that. For where I'm at in my career, I'm starting to wind down a bit, so I'm also in that mindset of I don't need to push my body to where it really, really hurts. So, you know, now when it starts to hurt, when you're getting up towards that top end max heart rate and you're hitting your VO2, I'm kind of telling myself I don't need to be in this pain, just back off. So, you know, that's kind of another a factor that might affect the masters athlete. If they're the top end and they're still trying to, you know, compete at a high level, they still have that willing and that desire to push themselves to, you know, through the pain barrier. Whereas others, they're kind of like, you know, I don't have to do this, I'm doing it more kind of for fun, recreational sort of thing, so they don't want the hurt. But what you've said about the bike there as well, it's something that I've incorporated probably last year. Well, I started using it in 2018 when I tore my calf, just to maintain fitness. But then when I was training for Boston last kind of January through to April, I did a lot on the bike. I started off doing the intervals on the bike just to kind of condition myself up. And then I was doing kind of trying to mimic long hill intervals on the bike. And now I do a lot of my recovery on the bike. So again, just to protect the body more than anything, because I'm finding now that it's taken me longer to recover between the hard days, and I can't do as many double days as I used to. So I just jump on the bike and have a bit of spin off. And just there tonight, before coming on here, I did an interval session on the bike, just looking at kind of what riders call over-unders. So it's kind of flirting with that lactate threshold and then coming under and then going back up. And yeah, the best thing about that is I find you don't have to do the long, hard sessions on the bike. You can do them much quicker. It was like a 30-minute session and I was over and done with. Whereas if I was out on the track, I'd be doing like 10, 12K to try and get that same adaptation.
Yeah, I think definitely I'd say that actually doing cross training is a great way of adding volume and potentially intensity in a safe way. And from my other webinars, you might remember me saying that actually one of the biggest predictors of performance is how much volume you can do. And if you're limited by picking up injuries, if you're trying to do loads of running and high intensity running, then actually adding in cross training is probably going to be a great way of getting those gains in a safe way. Yeah, and as Ali said, great. So we'll now move on to talking about muscle and what happens to our muscle and our muscle mass and strength as we age. And if we look at the this graph on the top right here, this is looking at actually what happens to muscle strength and mass as we age on a population level. So generally, as we go through puberty, we're going to put on muscle mass and build muscle strength. And that's going to peak in our mid-20s, through plateaus until about the age of 40, and then it's slowly going to decline. But actually, that rate of decline depends upon a range of different factors, and actually how much muscle mass you lose is quite individual. It's also interesting that we seem to lose our fast twitch, our type 2 muscle fibers, preferentially over those type 1, those slow twitch fibers. So the fast twitch fibers are those ones that are good at producing a lot of force in a short period of time. So they've got a good anaerobic capacity, they're good at glycolytic metabolism, so good at breaking down carbohydrates and producing lactate. Whereas our slow twitch ones, they can't produce as much force, but they're more fatigue resistant. And that's sort of like, that tallies with what most people consider aging to be. You sort of lose that ability to generate a lot of force quickly, but actually you're still quite good at running over an extended period. So you lose some of that bounce, some of that explosiveness, but actually our endurance is still fairly well protected. And there are also differences in how we lose muscle mass between sexes. So actually men lose their muscle mass at a greater rate than women. But actually it's probably partly because men start at a higher muscle mass point. So they're at their peak, they've got more muscle mass than women, so they've got more to lose. Whereas women start lower, but they maintain it better. But both of which are eventually going to reach the same sort of point where actually muscle mass can become quite a limiter for performance. But as I said, this is at a population level, so this isn't talking about the individual. This is sort of similar to the 10K single age records we saw earlier. This is at a population level, I'm not talking about the individual. So at the individual level, there's a large amount of variability, and a lot of you, I'm sure, will have seen this of these MRI scans, which have got an active male age 24, an inactive male age 66, and an active male who's walking 12,000 steps a day, age 66 as well. And there's a massive difference in their MRI scans. The 24-year-old active male has obviously got a good amount of muscle mass, which is the dark bits. The white bits of the fat, and there's some fat around the outside, but there's not much fatty infiltration into the muscle. And you compare that with the inactive 66-year-old, and there's a lot of superficial fat, and there's lots of fatty infiltration into the muscle, and there's a lot less muscle mass than there was previously. But actually, just walking 12,000 steps a day, so that's not exactly physical, that's not formal exercise training as such. This 66-year-old has preserved his muscle mass much better. There's a lot less superficial fat as well. And that's the individual responses again demonstrated in this graph here. This is the muscle. If you look at figure A, the cross-sectional area of the muscle is really individual. For example, this 80-year-old here has got the same amount of muscle mass as an average 20-year-old. So actually, at an individual level, it's really quite variable. So this shows us that actually muscles still respond to training. So regardless of what age we are, if we start doing some strength training, we are going to get stronger and we can still put on muscle mass. But actually, we might just need to do a little bit more training to get the same benefits. So practical takeaways again. So with running, what's really important to consider is we're not after maximal strength. We're not after who can squat the heaviest. Otherwise, Usain Bolt, who's probably really strong, would be the best at the marathon. That's not what we're after. We're after adequate strength. And actually, a younger athlete, and certainly a younger male, might have enough strength. He might have adequate strength for the demands of the sport. But as we saw earlier, muscle strength declines with age, and you can get to a point where actually strength really does become a limiting factor, and actually you can't produce the forces you need that are required for the event demands. And there's lots of, with those changes in strength, there's lots of things that strength affects. So strength training is really good for power. Power is how much force can you apply in a single step. In the context of running, that's what we're talking about. How much power, how much force can you generate in a single stride? And then economy sort of ties into this, and economy is how much energy do you require to run at a given pace? And actually, strength training has been shown to improve our economy, because actually the loads can be spread across more muscle. We can use there's a greater amount of muscle to share the load and spread the forces across. Strength training and suitable strength are really important for running mechanics, and we're going to talk a bit more about that later. And strength training is also really good for flexibility. There's stretching, and certainly static stretching doesn't seem to affect running performance. It doesn't seem to affect injury prevention. But again, like strength, we're not after maximal flexibility, we're after adequate flexibility. And strength training can actually be a really good way of maintaining and improving our flexibility. For example, if you can squat with a barbell on your back and you can get down to parallel, so by that I mean your thigh is parallel with the floor and our back's in a nice straight posture, then that means we've got an adequate range of motion for the event, for a running pattern, for a running stride. If we can squat parallel, then that shows us we've got enough range of motion at the hips and enough range of motion at the ankles to be able to carry out a normal good running mechanics. Strength training is good for injury prevention as well. We'll talk a bit about that later. And if we do some strength training, it's going to preserve our muscle mass. And muscle is a really metabolically active tissue, especially compared to fat. So that's going to mean that our basic metabolic rates, our resting energy consumption is going to be higher. And that's going to help protect us against weight gain and gaining of fat. What should we do in terms of strength training? The key areas we really want to look at are the calf complex, and we're going to talk a bit more about that specifically later. The quads, the hamstrings, the trunk, the glutes I've left off, but I've mentioned the glutes as well. But they're sort of the key areas we want to focus on. And I'm going to say we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but actually just doing some strength training is going to be really beneficial for maintaining our performance. And actually the actual details probably don't matter all that much. If you look back to the last slide, just walking 12,000 steps a day was enough to conserve muscle mass to some degree. So if we're doing some form of strength training, then that's going to be really beneficial for improving our maintaining our performance, or potentially improving our performance if we've never done strength training before. So I don't know if you want to jump in here, Ali. I know you're quite keen on strength training. You've incorporated quite a lot of that into your routine. Would you like to give us a bit of a lowdown on what you get up to?
Yeah, I do strength training twice a week in the gym. I have a strength and conditioning coach who we did a functional movement screen. I started working with her about 2.5 years ago, and yeah, it's all kind of geared around my weak areas. But I very first started in the gym back in 2012, so I will have been 33 just about then. And I do put that down as kind of one of the big factors about how I then jumped. In 2012 I was 234 runner. 2013 I ran 231, and then since then I've run kind of a couple of times under 230 and a handful of times again around that 231. And it was the strength training that I put down as the big factor, because the injury prevention side of things, I was a lot more robust. I spent a lot less time on the physio couch, a lot more consistent training, and I could get in those high volumes because my body was strong enough to be able to hold it. And you can see in that picture there on the screen, I don't have a huge deal of muscle mass. You know, I don't look like one of the sprinters with big bulging biceps and a six-pack and everything, but I'm strong for what I need to be strong for, and my running economy has improved. The last time I got my running economy measured, it was 182 in normal shoes and a pair of streaks, and then 178 in a pair of 4%. So yeah, kind of the running economy is very good, and that offsets my, what most people would call a poor VO2 in the lab. I've only been able to record kind of 59-60 on VO2, but most of my work is done around like those 4 areas there, kind of hamstrings, quads, glutes, because they're my weak areas, and then the calf complex, since tearing my calf in 2018. Kind of calf races have become my religion. Do them probably about 3 times a day, every day, and yeah, just, you know, it's kept me going. And it's not my favourite area of training, but I am learning to love it a bit as the years go by.
And I think when you spoke previously, and you said that your strength is actually still improving. I think even as you have got older, you're still managing. It's an area that you can still continue
the
to
power
see
side of
improvements in.
things are, because it's not something I've done as much. So things like box jumps, you know, when I got my screen 2.5 years ago, I couldn't have jumped onto a piece of paper. My feet didn't leave the ground, and you can see that in my running style as well. But now we've worked on that, and I can now jump onto, you know, a fairly decent, bearing in mind I'm only 5 foot tall myself, you know, I can get one that's up to about knee height on me. And yeah, the power's coming, and kind of, again, the flexibility. I'm not a big fan of stretching. I'll put my hands up and say I don't do any apart from my mobility routine at the start of my gym sessions, but my hips are starting to get a bit looser, and kind of I'm starting to get that little bit of mobility back into my back, which, you know, as you get old, it's kind of the running joke, isn't it? Like, you turn into a stiff old person, woman, man, whatever. And yeah, I'm trying to offset that a little bit by doing my mobility and my not stretch and flexibility, but kind of the functional movement flexibility.
That's great. And just going back to those economy measures there, that's a truly world-class economy. So although, yeah, your VO2 max may not be as high as some, actually, the reference value, the audience, 200 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per kilometer, sorry, is normally a good benchmark. And to get down into the 180s and 170s with some super shoes on is really good. So,
it was only 3.27% improvement though, so I want my money back. It wasn't the full 4%.
Yeah, I think you should definitely get your money back from that. Yeah. Interestingly, on a side note, economy is something that actually athletes maintain quite well even as they get older. So although we have a VO2 max decline, our economy is actually normally reasonably stable. We probably will see some decline if you lose strength, but actually the fact that your economy is so good, Ali, should probably leave you in good stead for the next few years. I think 100 kilometer world record next.
No.
Great. So now we're going to move on to talk about tendons and their strength and the elasticity. So hopefully you'll know, but tendons link muscle to bone. And the most well-known tendon to runners is because it gives us so much grief, is the Achilles tendon. And the Achilles, it acts as both a spring, but also a force buffer. So think of it as a spring first. When our foot hits the ground in a running stride, the Achilles then stretches and it stores some energy in this stretched Achilles, like an elastic band. And then when we toe off, so when our foot comes off the ground and we propel ourselves forward, the Achilles will shorten like a contracting elastic band, and it will propel us forward. And this is good because that's work that we haven't had to use our muscles for. This is in effect free energy. We've not had to use oxygen or energy to produce that force. This is force that we've got for free from a previous strides. So actually having an Achilles and a stiff Achilles, which works as a good energy absorber, is really beneficial. So as well as acting as a spring, it also acts as a force buffer. So if we think about the same scenario again, so the foot hits the ground, but this time we don't have an Achilles tendon. The calf muscle is just attached straight to the heel bone. This time when we hit the ground, the forces go straight into the muscle, and the muscles aren't designed to cope with this, and they're going to tear, or they're going to be overloaded, basically. They could rip. So actually having the tendon there to absorb some of those forces that are going through our leg as we hit the ground protects our muscles from injury. So they're also important for explosive movements. So the more we load an Achilles, so the faster we're going, basically, the more energy it's going to absorb, and the more energy it's going to dissipate when we toe off. And as I said, they're really important for running economy, because if we have a nice functioning Achilles, which is stiff and they're going to absorb lots of energy and then give it back when we toe off, then that's all energy we haven't had to use our muscles for. That's free energy in effect to help propel us forward. But because there's lots of load going through through our Achilles, it's also a common site of injury, and especially in masters athletes. Women, particularly as they get older, are more likely to experience Achilles injuries, whereas in their younger days they may not have. And that's because actually estrogen, which is a reproductive hormone, a female sex hormone, makes women's tendons a bit more pliable. They're more stretchy, so they're not quite so good for economy because they're not as stiff. They're more flexible, but it does mean they're less prone to injury. But actually, when estrogen levels drop post-menopause, then the Achilles becomes a bit stiffer. It becomes not so strong, not so thick, not so robust. So actually, women who have never had Achilles problems when they were younger might be more likely to see Achilles injuries when they're older. And men, again, men are more likely to see Achilles injuries anyway, but as they get older, they're going to see the risk of an Achilles injury goes up again as their structure of the Achilles deteriorates a bit. So as I said, a stiff tendon is a good tendon, because a stiff tendon is going to be a good store. It's going to store energy really nicely, and then it's going to release it back when we toe off. So a stiff tendon is a good tendon. But actually, after a training session that's stressed our tendons a lot, so something that's high intensity or something that's long duration, our tendon stiffness goes down. And so it's going to be suboptimal for performance. But actually, in a young athlete, that tendon stiffness recovers quite quickly. So it's going to take hours. Within hours, our tendons have recovered, they've regained their stiffness, and they're ready to go again and be economical. But in a masters athlete, the stiffness doesn't return quite so quickly. So instead of hours, it might be days until their Achilles gets back to an optimum level of stiffness. So in a practical scenario, a young athlete might be able to do a high intensity training session on the Saturday, which is going to stress the Achilles quite a lot. And then on the Sunday, they might be able to do their long run fine, because their Achilles stiffness is back and they can bounce along the floor quite nicely. Whereas in the older athlete, because their Achilles stiffness recovers not so quickly, they'll do the high intensity session on the Saturday, but when it comes to Sunday, their pop has gone. They're no longer bouncing off the floor nicely. They're having to use more of their muscles, and this is probably going to predispose them to Achilles and other injuries that are going to be affected by their mechanics. So actually, the older athlete, especially if you suffer from Achilles injuries, you might want to make sure you spread out things that are going to strain your Achilles to a greater degree. So those high intensity training sessions and those long duration training sessions, you might need to spread them out a little bit more than you did when you were younger. And then we're going to talk about the calf and the Achilles together as one single unit. So on a population level, from the age of 20 to 60 years, on average, there's a 15% decline in the cross-sectional area of your calf, so you're losing muscle mass. Achilles stiffness goes down, and as I said earlier, Achilles, we want a stiff Achilles, which is going to be an economical spring, and our calf strength goes down by 31% as well. And all that together leads to a decrease in stride length, 13% decreased stride length in those 40 years, or on average about 4 centimeters a decade. And we see this. It's the stereotypical older athlete has a more shuffly stride. Their stride length is going down compared to the younger athlete who's more bouncy off the ground and has got a longer stride length. And this is mostly to do with actually changes within the calf and the Achilles tendon. So obviously, what can we do about it? Tendons respond best to high loads. They like high loads, we're going through them. So we want to do, if we're doing strength training, we want to do 6 to 10 reps to near failure, and 3 to 4 sets of this. So if we were to explain that again, we probably want to do just 6 reps, and by the end of the 6th one or the end of the 10th one, somewhere in that range, you probably couldn't do any more. You might be able to do 1 more maybe, but actually you're putting a lot of load through the Achilles and the calf muscles. And there's 2 main muscles that make up the calf. You've got the soleus, which is a deeper muscle, and that's targeted best for doing seated calf raises. So this person here, they've got a machine in the gym, and they're just using their calves to push their knees up and down. There's lots of ways of improvising with this at home, especially at the minute where gyms, you may or may not have access to gyms. I've heard of people having people sit on their lap with their toes on a book and pushing their legs up and down. That's quite a common one. And then to target the other muscle of the calf, the gastrocnemius, we want to do that with a straight-legged calf raise. So this person here again is on a Smith machine, and they can go up and down and stress their gastrocnemius in that way. And again, I think there's lots of videos out there, people doing this on the stairs with a rucksack on. And you can do, if you want to need to stress it more, you can do single leg, and probably doing it single leg instead of double leg is a better way of doing it, just to counteract any imbalances that you might have. I know, Ali, you said you've struggled from Achilles tendon injuries in the past, and you said you're quite on top of your Achilles conditioning and your calf conditioning. Anything you'd like to say about that, or maybe how you found? You've said that you found yourself to become a bit more bouncy as you've added this sort of training in.
Yeah, I was lucky. I'd never had any Achilles issues until probably about this time in 2017. So leading into the World Championships at London, I was starting to get a little bit of kind of discomfort around that area, and I was finally diagnosed with a retrocalcanean bursa, which, because that was getting inflamed, it was then stretching the Achilles over the calcaneus, and it was just starting to kind of cause a bit of grief. So I got through the Commonwealth Games in 2018, and then I got some minor surgery to drain that bursa, and touch wood, the Achilles have been okay since then, but I probably put a little bit too much force through the calf not long after that and tore the calf. But yeah, I've been religious with my calf races. We've also added in just some very, very basic plyometrics. So, we're not looking at massive, complicated power jumps and drop jumps and straight leg jumps and that kind of thing. It's very basic hop movements, so literally just two-legged hops or jumps, whatever you want to call them, one-legged hops, skipping just with a jump rope, 20 seconds on, 20 seconds off, times 6, and just building up kind of that force production through the Achilles and the calf. And yeah, it's just stuff that you can do, around the house, using the stairs for calf races and that. And so far, I'm okay with it. It's not giving us any trouble, apart from first thing on the morning, especially after I've done a hard session the night before or the day before, and you've got to spend the first 10 minutes after waking up kind of doing circles and writing the alphabet with your foot just to get that calf and Achilles moving again. And then, it's that tentative first step out of bed just to see how they are. And like you were saying earlier, I've adapted my training as well, because I now know that I can't do a hard session, on a Saturday and then a long run on a Sunday. And, I can't even do the traditional Tuesday, Thursday that a lot of harriers do. I now do a hard day, 2 easy days, a hard day, 2 easy days. And that fits in well with me because I am still a full-time athlete, so I don't have to worry about kind of fitting it around work and everything. So I can do a long run on a Tuesday or a Wednesday morning, whatever. But it also gives me time for my body to absorb the training, but also kind of give it enough recovery time so I'm not putting too much stress on it and risking the injury.
Yeah, that's great. And again, I think that the hops, just doing the simple hops, are also really good. So if you have progressed so that your calf is strong enough, for those people who aren't quite so bouncy, I think Ali commented that she hasn't got much of pop, and I'm the same. I've not got much. I'm quite flat on the floor, and actually just simple hops are actually really good for learning how to be more reactive to the ground. And again, they're probably going to be a great way of loading the Achilles as well. But again, actually be careful with those.
And for me, because I don't have that pop, it was keeping things nice and basic instead of trying to do all these complicated drills and straight leg jumps and all that kind of stuff, which I don't have the coordination to do as well. And
and injury risk again with them as well.
Yeah, and again, kind of doing the drills it's all well and good trying to do like a skip and a B skip, but if you haven't got the technique correct, you know, what's the point? You're wasting your time. So just stick to the basic things, get good at those first, and then think about kind of the extra 1% once you've mastered the 99%.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Start with the hops, and then you can go on to the
Yep.
funky things if you've mastered that. Great. So we're into the last section now. This is hormonal changes, and what difference between men and women there are as we age. So women, theirs is a bit more complicated than men, but we've got as they go through the menopause, and there's sort of three sections to this. We've got the perimenopause, which is the 5 years leading up to the menopause. Then we've got the menopause, which is the loss of that cycle. And then afterwards, we've got the post-menopause, and that's sort of the state that you're in for the rest of your life. And actually, most of the symptoms that come with the associated with menopause are actually the perimenopause, and this is a loss of. It's because there's a decoupling between estrogen and progesterone, which are two key hormones, especially in women. And actually, once we get to the menopause, there's a flat line of estrogen, and then LH and FSH skyrocket. And that flatlining of estrogen is really quite important, because estrogen is it's an anabolic hormone. So that means it helps promote muscle mass, it helps promote bone strength, and there's lots of physiological functions. And women quite quickly go from a fluctuating level of estrogen when they've got their monthly cycle to a flat line of estrogen levels. And this comes with a number of different symptoms. As I said, muscle mass goes down, and this is accompanied by loss of strength. Insulin sensitivity is also something that's affected. So insulin is what we use to control our blood sugar levels. So actually, women post-menopause are they're not as good as processing glucose and simple sugars. So that's might have an effect on that might lead to putting on weight, and you just don't process carbohydrates quite so well as you did previously. Estrogen is also protective for bone strength. So once we lose that estrogen stimulus, your bone strength goes down, and that's going to predispose you to bone type injuries, stress fractures and things like that. So some people choose to go onto hormone replacement therapy, and that can actually mitigate some of these changes. So it can maintain your muscle strength and your power. But it's also associated with a decrease in tendon strength, and that's going to leave it more prone to injury. So there's things to weigh up. Men actually experience a lot of the same symptoms as women. So they get a loss of muscle mass and a loss of muscle strength. They're more likely to put on fat. There's less bone strength. But this change is more gradual, and this is because their testosterone levels slowly reduce over the whole lifespan. So even by the time you get into your 30s, your 40s, testosterone is going down, and it's just going to continue on that trajectory, unfortunately, as we get older, and that's going to lead to a lot of the same symptoms as females experience. But again, there are things we can do to help compensate for these hormonal changes. As I said earlier, regular strength training is going to really help maintain our muscle mass, our muscle strength, and our bone mass as well. Strength training is really good for making sure maintaining our bones are strong. And if we've got lots of muscle mass, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but it's going to maintain a high metabolism, and that's going to protect us against weight change, which does naturally happen once we've gone through the menopause and as our testosterone levels go down in men. So yeah, regular strength training 2 or 3 times a week is going to be really beneficial and really helping our performance. Nutritional strategies can also come into play, and Lucy Marlins did a great webinar on nutrition, which is on the Welsh Athletics YouTube channel, so check that one out if you haven't already. But she talks about periodizing carbohydrates, and as I said, women, and as well men will too, to a lesser extent, they're no longer as good as processing carbohydrates. They're more likely to turn it into fat than store it in their muscles as glycogen. So common buzz phrase at the minute is periodizing carbohydrate ingestion, and this basically means matching our carbohydrate intake to the demands of our training. So if we're going to do a high intensity training session, or a high intensity training session which is going to rely a lot on carbohydrate stores, on glycogen, or if we're going to do a long training session, a long run or a long cycle, then we're going to want to make sure we've got a good carbohydrate intake in the few meals leading up to that training session. So we're going to want to make sure we're well fueled so we can perform that training session with good quality. But actually, if we're having a rest day, or we're only going to do an easy low volume training session, then we don't need to take in quite so much carbohydrate, and we can rely more on fats and proteins to get our energy sources. And this is going to help, this will probably help protect us against weight gain, but also actually give us good training adaptations. If we train in a state where there isn't lots of carbohydrate availability, it triggers very good mitochondrial adaptations. It's good for promoting our use of fats as a fuel source. So yeah, training high, resting low is a good option. Actually, increasing protein intake is also probably a really good strategy. As I said, if we muscle mass, losing muscle mass is one of the key, reasons why performance deteriorates with aging. But if we keep that protein intake nice and high, that's going to promote retaining of our muscle mass. And again, protein is quite satiating. You feel quite content and full if you've eaten lots of protein. So actually, on a day where we don't need lots of fuel sources, if we don't need lots of carbohydrate, then upping our protein intake is probably going to help us control our fat mass a bit better. Is there anything you'd like to add on that last section, Ali? We talked about strength training quite a lot. I don't know if you use any nutritional strategies such as this, but
not really, just kind of the general, if I've got a long run coming up, I'll make sure, like you say, I'll eat plenty of carbs the day before. I don't follow any strict kind of diet or nutrition, just to make sure that I am getting, it's been kind of, discussed a lot whether it's a true window or not, but that 20-30 minute window after a hard session, just make sure I get my carbs and protein back in. Just a simple chocolate milk. I normally just do like 300 mils of whole milk and 3 scoops of Nesquik. And
yeah, I like that combo.
Yeah, if I want a little bit more protein, I'll shove in a spoonful of peanut butter or almond butter or something like that. And then again, making sure I get in protein after my gym sessions, especially if I've then got another run to do. It's not just a recovery run after, but just to make sure I'm keeping that protein intake up. I think really since turning 40, the only things that's changed in my nutrition strategy is more beer and cake. And I think that's just because I'm a bit more relaxed about things now, and I'm not kind of just totally everything's focused on performance. I'm still trying to do some good performances and that, but I'm no longer trying to challenge for Olympics and World Championships and that, so I'm a bit more relaxed so I can get a few more carbs in via beer.
I think well earned as well. Yeah, great. So that's basically it. Concluding thoughts. I think as a conclusion, as a summary, training will work at any age. Actually, you can still improve upon whatever you are now. If you start doing new training, for example, if you've never been in the gym before, then you can get a lot stronger than you were when you were in your 20s if you weren't doing strength training then. And actually, depending upon your training history, you probably can still run personal bests in your 40s and maybe even beyond. Certainly, if you haven't already optimized your training, if you weren't already training at a really high level in your 20s, like as we saw the example of Emma, Emma didn't start running until her mid-30s, so she could progress her training and still run PBs in her 40s. In terms of VO2 max, including some high intensity training is probably going to help protect against your decline in VO2 max. Obviously, there's considerations about injury prevention, and so for some people, doing it in a cross-training manner may be more appropriate. But actually, if you are going to start doing some high intensity training and you haven't done it before, just approach it with some level of caution. Maybe for those first few sessions, look for like an 80% intensity instead of a 90% intensity, just slowly build it up over time. And we've talked about strength training quite a lot through this, but actually strength training really is going to become much more important as you get older. And there's so many benefits to it, even for young athletes, but especially for those who are over the age of 40. Strength training becomes really, really crucial. So that's the webinar wrapped up. I hope you've enjoyed. If you've got any questions, put them in the questions function. I know we've been going over an hour now, so we probably haven't got time to put too many in. But yeah, if you've got any, just chuck them in there now, and me and Ali will try and do our best to answer them. Okay, let me just get it up properly for me. I can see it. Oh, we've got a few. That's good. Okay. We'll just have a look through. So, is it possible to maintain our fast twitch muscle fibers as you get older? So, I said earlier that if we, as a population, we tend to lose our fast twitch muscle fibers compared to our slow twitch muscle fibers as we age. And I don't think there's much evidence out there or much scientific research out there on this particular topic, Gregory, but I would say that the best way of increasing the chance that we are going to retain them is by continuing to use them. So we recruit our fast twitch muscle fibers by doing strength training, but also just by running at high speeds. So if we keep running at high speeds in our training, we're probably more likely to maintain them better than someone who isn't doing some high intensity training or some strength training. And it comes down to the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. So your chances of maintaining those fast twitch muscle fibers can be much better if you continue to do some form of high intensity training, whether that be strength training or if it's sprints up a hill, for example. Okay, so John Parkin has asked, how much is the difference between actual age and the number of years that we've been running? So if I only started running at 36, does this have a similar profile for the decline and improvements you've discussed? It probably depends, John, upon if the amount of training that you can do, the amount of training you can handle, and all those other factors that we talked about earlier. So actually, I think if we go back to the very first slide, we were talking about the drop off in 10K performance. The rate of decline was pretty steady from the age of 40 to about the age of 70. So actually, we probably are going to see it's probably going to be a pretty similar profile anywhere along that spectrum. But actually, if you can keep progressing your training, so for example, if you're running 40 miles a week now, and actually over the next few years, you get up to more like 80 miles a week, and you weren't including strength training, but now you are including strength training, then there's no reason why you can't continue to improve your performance. The exact age of where you probably can't see any more increases in fitness, that's right, it's probably impossible to say for anybody. But actually, all the research out there suggests that we do keep responding to training at any age, and if we can continue to improve the quality and the volume of our training over time, then we probably are going to keep seeing improvements. Here's a question for you, Ali, from Simon Wells. Do you consider a long run a hard day? So is a long run a hard day for you, or is it you count it as an easy day?
When I'm in marathon training, it's definitely a hard day because like my long run in marathon training can be anything from 20 miles to 26 miles. No, I've even done 27s before. And I don't just do them as a long, slow run. I do them at quite a good, steady pace. So when I was running my marathon PBs, my long runs would be 24, 25, 26 mile at about 6:10, 6:20 average. I always do one full distance run in my build up, normally about 5 or 6 weeks out from the race day. And I've been known to do them in like 2:47s, 2:48s. So definitely a hard day and not just a slow time on your feet. But outside of marathon training, so kind of the last few months, they have been more. I've been doing 18, 20 miles and not really focusing as much on the pace of those runs, just getting the time on my feet back into us so that I'm ready when I do get back to marathon training next year, that the body, it's not a shock to the system, the body's ready to step up that pace. And I probably is also then, at the minute, I'm not doing my usual 9-day cycle. When I go into marathon training, I'll change it to 9 days so that it all fits in rather than trying to cram everything in kind of Monday to Sunday.
So does that look like 2 interval sessions and a long run, Ali, or something like that, or a tempo session,
I'll
interval session and a long run?
During marathon training, my 9 days, I'll start off with an easy day. So I'll start on a Monday with an easy day. Tuesday, I'll be on the track, and that normally is about 12K worth of volume of effort. And that's kind of a mixture of paces. I like to try and keep in touch with speed a little bit. So I'll try and put in at least some kind of 400 or 5K pace in there. But it's normally more kind of 10K, maybe it's a little bit half marathon pace. A recovery day the next day, so just 2 easy runs. I'll do my gym on my track day as well, so on the afternoon. By this time we're on to Thursday, that'll be a medium long, so 15, 16 mile, again quite steady. Friday will be some sort of tempo, either straight through 13, 14 miles at marathon effort, because again, a lot of this is done at altitude, so it's hard to run at marathon pace for those distances. Or I might do something like 3 by 5 miles, or 5 mile, 4 mile, 3 mile, 2 mile, 1 mile. Gym on the afternoon, then a recovery run, 2 easy days, and then the long run, and then the day after long run's a rest day, and start all over again.
Great, yeah, and that sounds like a nice balance of hard days and easy days.
Yeah, and I've found I need those extra easy days now that I'm getting older, just like I said earlier, so I can absorb and
yeah.
kind of, I can't even do the 120s, 115s that I used to do. I've had to back down to kind of, it's not a huge difference, but like 110s.
Yeah. Well, I find I need the extra easy days now, so I don't know what I hope I've got for the future. But yeah, so Judith Nixon has said, can I replace hill training for the gym? And I think that's a good question. And hill training, specifically those short hills, I think they are going to add a strength component to the running. You're certainly going to load the muscles more. I'm not sure that it can completely replace it. I think it really is quite popular now to do some really short hills with long recovery. So 10-second hills, you might do 6 by 10-second hills at 8 times 10-second hills with just a gentle walk back recovery. And that is probably going to give you some strength benefits, and it probably is going to, you are going to recruit a lot of muscle fibers. Are a few considerations of hills though, and that's that if you struggle with Achilles, if you struggle with Achilles problems, then hills stress your Achilles a lot more. And you also haven't got the same range of motion sprinting up a hill compared to, let's say, doing a squat in the gym. It's quite, but you've got shorter strides. So I'd say that I know a lot of people don't like going to the gym. I don't like going to the gym. I don't like doing strength training. I'm a runner. I like to run. That's the typical response. But I'd say that actually, if you want to really get the biggest benefits, you probably want to be doing some gym stuff. And the short hills are really good, and some hill work is really good. But actually, certainly for the calf complex, you're probably going to want to include some strength training in there as well. I'm afraid, Judith, because I'm sure you were probably looking for the answer, but is now you can just do hills. We'll do 2 more questions because time's ticking, and I don't want to keep you here all night. So how we sort of covered. Kerry asked how many interval sessions would you recommend for an over 40s per week, and I would agree with Ali and say that actually 2 is probably plenty, and 2 is probably plenty for most people. If you look at some of the best runners in the world, they actually tend to only include 2 interval training sessions a week, and these are professional athletes. So why would a 40-year-old include more than that? If we look at Mo Farah, for example, he typically seems to do 2 hard sessions a week. Maybe some people are stretching to 3, but certainly no one is doing more than 3. And I think it's actually probably safer to stick with 1 or 2 actually if you're in your 40s or above.
Definitely say stick to a maximum of 2 and make sure they are good quality sessions. If you try and squeeze a 3rd one in, the quality is going to disappear and you're basically wasting your time. So yeah, just stick to 2 and make sure that they are really good quality and get good quality recovery in between.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just going to find one more. There's a few repeat questions here. I'm just scrolling through to one that's that we haven't really covered yet. Okay. Here's a good one. We'll combine the 2 together because I think it's quite a sort of link. And I'll direct this at you, Ali. Do you use heart rate to guide your easy pace runs? And how much slower is your easy run than your marathon pace?
Not so much my easy runs because I've been running so long now, kind of I can judge my effort quite well. I know, when I'm pushing too much or anything, but I have started using heart rate a bit more on recoveries just to make sure I am, fully recovering and I'm not overloading my body too much. Easy runs, I don't really have an easy pace because, if you've done a hard session, like if I'd done a hard session today, I know tomorrow morning would be pretty slow, kind of in my standard. So you'd be looking at like 7:45s, maybe 8-minute miling. Whereas comes Thursday morning and I'm a bit more recovered, my easy pace then could be down to 6:45s. So it can vary across the week compared to what I've done the day before, residual fatigue. So yeah, I don't really have an easy pace. I just go by kind of effort level. And if you're running with other people, if you haven't got a heart rate monitor, the great way to judge is, can you hold a conversation when you're talking? If you can't, you're working too hard and you need to back off. And again, if you're doing kind of your threshold and tempo runs, you can do the talk test. Kind of threshold runs, you should only be able to say a couple of words. Tempo run, maybe it's a sentence or 2. Anything more than that and you're in the wrong zone. So yeah, one of the things where kind of, for me, and it sounds a bit daft and I look a bit daft out on the street when I do it, I'll sometimes sing to myself. If I can sing a few lines of a song out loud, it means that I'm in my easy zone still. If I'm gasping for breath after that, I need to back off a bit. So yeah, kind of heart rate training is good, but I don't get hung up on it.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I think heart rate training is best for those athletes those runners who are newer to the sport. I think those older athletes have a really good appreciation of what easy feels like. But actually, when you start out in running, or you haven't got as extensive a history, people aren't quite aware of how hard they're working. So I think actually with a new runner, using heart rate can be really useful. And I tend to tell people that if your heart rate is under about 70–75% of max, you're probably in the right area. And again, if you can talk, like Ali said, if you can sing, you're gonna be in the right area. But if you're really finding it quite hard to talk, if your exertion levels are like 6, 7 out of 10, then you're probably going a bit too hard. And actually, as a general rule, you probably can't run too slow. The slower you go, the fresher you're going to be for your hard sessions. And actually, getting that balance right is really important. And if you can get that balance right, that's the best way of making training sustainable, that you can keep putting days back to back to back, and you can keep ticking off those hard sessions. And that's how you make big improvements in performance. It's all about getting that consistency. I think keeping easy runs easy is the best way of getting that consistency. Great. So there are still a few questions. I'm hoping that I can save them, and I might be, and I'll be, if I can, then I'll be able to. I'll write up a few answers, and we can send those send the answers out to people who registered. But thanks everyone for attending. Thanks very much, Ali, for giving up your time. It's been fantastic, and looking through these comments and questions at the end, everyone seems to have really appreciated your inputs. That's great. Yeah, thanks very much, guys. This is if you want to recap, this is going to be recorded and put onto the Welsh Athletics YouTube channel. Keep an eye out for any more webinars that are going to be going that are being produced by Welsh Athletics. There are still a few coming up, I think. So great, thanks, Ali.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Cheers, and yeah, good night, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.